Welcome friends to this course on understanding absurdist drama. We are in week 7 and this is going to be lecture number 4. Today we'll discuss Tom Stoppard's play Travesties. Travesties first premiere in London on June 23, 1974. The play combines historical fiction, philosophical debate and literary pastiche. It takes place in Zurich, Switzerland during World War I and revolves around Henry Carr, a minor British consular official who recounts his encounters with key historical figures James Joyce, Tristan Tzara, associated with Dadaism, and Vladimir Lenin, the future socialist revolutionary. The play explores the intellectual tensions and artistic movements of the early 20th century. Modernism associated with James Joyce, Dadaism associated with Tzara, and Marxism of Lenin through Carr's comedic and highly unreliable recollections. The historical Henry Carr was a British consular official who is best known for his involvement in a 1917 production of Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest in Zurich, Switzerland, which was also supported by James Joyce. And there was a conflict between the two, because of which Joyce lampooned him in his very famous novel Ulysses. Travesties is a play about the conflict between art and politics. It is about a very important question whether artist should be politically neutral or he should become an activist. Tom Stoppard's play is an absurdist intervention into this debate between art and politics. The play begins with nonsensical conversations that we come across when we confront some characters on the stage. Tzara says, "El et enormous apple Tzara, ki dairy sef hath he will learn umfra, il rest alas whisper skill letter nut ist, nun avuncular il de clara." Cecily says, "Shh." Joyce says, "Decil holus imes." Gwen says, "Decil holus imes." Joyce says, "Thrice, hum." Joyce says, "Send us bright one, light one, horn, quickening, and womb fruit." Gwen says, "Send us bright one, light one, horn, quickening, and womb fruit." Joyce says, "Thrice." Gwen says, Joyce says, "Hoopsa, boy, a boy, hoopsa." Gwen says, "Hoopsa, boy, a boy, hoopsa." Joyce says, "Hoopsa, boy, a boy, hoopsa." For an English audience, these words are nothing but nonsense. We cannot make out anything of this illogical conversation. However, Tom Stoppard has a deeper meaning to suggest. If we translate the conversation of Tzara in the opening lines that we see into French, we can find out some meaning. It can be translated as, "He is a man called Tzara who has unparalleled talent. He stays in Switzerland because he is an artist. We have only art," he declared. So, if we examine this translation of Tzara's words into French limerick, we realize that the dialogues of Tzara are referring to Dadaist movement, about which we have already discussed in week 1. Further, if we go deeper into the dialogues of Joyce and Gwen, we realize that Joyce is giving his dictation to Gwen. His final words here, "Hoopsa, boy, a boy, hoopsa," are taken from his very famous novel Ulysses, where they announce the birth of a baby boy. In the play, Stoppard imagines that in the year 1917, three very important historical figures, Joyce, Lenin, and Tzara, met each other as they happened to be there in Zurich that year. Although this meeting is not historically correct and it is a figment of imagination, yet it has a deeper meaning. The purpose of the play, Tom Stoppard suggests, is to debate what should be the role of art and artist in a society. The conversation between Jara and Henry Carr that you see on the slide is symptomatic of this debate. Carr says, "How are you, my dear Tristan? What brings you here?" Jara says, "Pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring anyone anywhere? Eating and drinking. As usual, I see, Henry. I have often observed that stoical principles are more easily borne by those of Epicurean habits." You would remember that Zara was anti-art, Jara was anti-culture, Jara was anti-society, anti-norm, anti-morality. He was anti-everything. Jara believed that words have lost their capacity to express something meaningful in life. Therefore, he would use meaningless words to communicate the meaninglessness of life and existence. Unlike Carr, who believes that art has a social function, its purpose is to beautify human existence. According to Jara, the purpose of art is merely to pronounce da 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 da. Carr considers Jara's da 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 as pure nonsense. However, Jara contradicts him by saying that it is not clever nonsense. Why? Because so much nonsense has been spilled out in human society because of the clever use of words. Don't you think so? Human beings use words to hide their true intentions. The cleverer human beings are, the more dangerous they become because they circulate falsehood, untruth, lies around with their words. Jara says, what is the use of art and literature during World War I? If poets, dramatists, writers could reform humanity, this world war would not have taken place. War clearly suggests that there is no possibility of human progress. War clearly indicates that the promise of a just society through literature, through art, is nothing but a hoax, a fraud. For Jara, art is anything and everything. There is no difference between high art and low art. There is no difference between profound literature and profane literature. Whatever one writes is literature. Whatever one creates is art. As Jara says when confronted by Carr. Carr says, on the contrary, I say, I have just told you I can. Don't you see, my dear Tristan? You are simply asking me to accept that the word art means whatever you wish it to mean, but I do not accept it. Jara says, why not? You do exactly the same thing with words like patriotism, duty, love, freedom, king, country, brave little Belgium, saucy little Serbia. Jara is saying that words have lost their meaning. They have become without substance. Words like patriotism, duty, freedom are as meaningless as the word da 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 is. Patriotism may mean one thing for me, it may mean another thing for you. There are different meanings attached to the same word. Which meaning should one subscribe to? Duty for me would be entirely different from your conception of duty. What should I consider my duty? Whether I should be guided by your frameworks of duty or I should dictate my own frameworks. And what is the possibility of any connection between your frameworks of duty and my frameworks of duty? Similarly, freedom for you has a different meaning. Freedom for me has a different meaning. Whose freedom should I talk about? When a writer writes about freedom, when a writer writes about duty, patriotism, whose freedom, whose duty should he talk about. That's why Jara promotes his anti-art movement. This anti-art movement may be nonsensical, but it has lots of meaning. It is profounder. It philosophizes the absurdity of life, meaninglessness of life. Elaborating this idea of anti-art, Jara further says, music is corrupted, language conscripted, words are taken to stand for their opposites. That's why anti-art is the art of our time. Carr contradicts him and says, the nerve of it. Wars are fought to make the world safe for artists. It is never quite put in those terms, but it is a useful way of grasping what civilized ideals are all about. The easiest way of knowing whether good has triumphed over evil is to examine the freedom of the artist, the ingratitude of artists, indeed their hostility, not to mention the loss of nerve and failure of talent which accounts for modern art, merely demonstrate the freedom of the artist to be ungrateful, hostile, self-centered and talentless, for which freedom I went to war. Jara contradicts him and says wars are fought for oil wells and coaling stations, for control of Dardanelles and the Suez Canal, for colonial pickings to buy cheap in and conquered markets to sell dear in. War is capitalism with the gloves off, and many who go to war know it, but they go to war because they don't want to be a hero. It takes courage to sit down and be counted. But how much better to live bravely in Switzerland than to die cravenly in France, quite apart from what it does to one's trousers. You can clearly understand that Henry Carr's views about art correspond to bourgeois conception of art. According to Henry Carr, the artist also has a responsibility towards society. Henry Carr has participated in World War I. He says he fought that war for the freedom of the artist, which is immediately contradicted by Jara. Jara says war is not fought to ensure the freedom of the artist. It is an outcome of jingoism. It is an outcome of uncritical patriotism. War is fought because there are capitalist interests. There are colonialist interests. Soldiers fight wars without knowing why they are fighting, for whom they are fighting, whether do they really want to fight the war or they are thrown into the battlefield where they have no other option but to fight the war which is not their own. However, Henry Carr considers that such a view is futile and meaningless. In his estimation, artists and writers are cowards, they are self-centered, they don't want to fight for a brave new world which soldiers want to create. James Joyce, another famous modernist writer of his times, known for art's sake, joins this conversation between Henry Carr and Tristan Jara. They represent two antagonistic views to each other. While Jar represents anti-art philosophy of art, Joyce proposes his philosophy of art for art's sake. Jara says, by God, you supercilious streak of Irish puke, you four-eyed, bog-ignorant, potato-eating pawns, your art has failed. You have turned literature into religion. It is as dead as all the rest. It is an overripe crops, and you are cutting fancy figures at the wake. It is too late for geniuses. Now we need vandals and desecrators, simple-minded demolition men to smash centuries of Baroque subtlety, to bring down the temple and thus finally to reconcile the shame and the necessity of being an artist. Dada, Dada, Dada. Joyce contradicts him and says, you are an overexcited little man with a need for self-expression far beyond the scope of your natural gifts. This is not discreditable. Neither does it make you an artist. An artist is a magician put among men to gratify capriciously their urge for immortality. The temples are built and brought down around him continuously and contiguously, from Troy to the fields of Flanders. If there is any meaning in any of it, it is in what survives as art. Yes, even in the celebration of tyrants. Yes, even in the celebration of tyrants. Jara accuses Joyce of converting literature into a religion, which is already dead. Jara is also against this view that writers and artists are genius. They have higher capability. Jara wants the demolition of temples which consider writers and artists to be superior to all other human beings. His point of view is simple. All human beings are equally capable of expression. There is no difference between what a writer writes or what an ordinary man writes. There is no difference between the painting of Picasso and your painting and my painting. However, Joyce immediately contradicts this anti-art view of Jara. He says all human beings do not have capacity for creative self-expression. It requires talent. Although all human beings have desire for self-expression, there is a conflict between desire for self-expression and the ability for self-expression. For Joyce, artist has a higher function. His role is to guide society. His art is there to reform men so that humanity could be improved, a better world could be envisioned. For Joyce, art is religion and the artist is a priest. There is also an interesting conversation about the social function of art, and this conversation takes place between Carr and Jara, Carr and Lenin. Jara says as a Dadaist, I am the natural enemy of bourgeois art, the natural ally of political left. But odd thing about revolution is that further left you go politically, the more bourgeois they like their art. Carr says there is nothing odd about it. Revolution in art is no way connected with class revolution. Artists are members of a privileged class. Art is absurdly overrated by artists, which is understandable. But what is strange is that it is absurdly overrated by everyone else. Here we find out that Henry Carr shares this belief that artists are not superior to ordinary human beings. Like Czar, he also considers that art is nothing special. It is ordinary, yet he does not conform to the socialist or Leninist view of art. Carr says, I learned three things in Zurich during the war. Firstly, you are either a revolutionary or you are not. And if you are not, you might as well be an artist as anything else. Secondly, if you cannot be an artist, you might as well be a revolutionary. I forget the third thing. Carr here clearly indicates that a person or an individual could either be an artist or revolutionary. Either you can think or you can act. So there is a binary which is being created by Stoppard between thinking mind and acting mind. To be revolutionary requires courage, courage which mostly artists lack. Although this idea was contested by James Joyce earlier, who considers to be an artist in times of war also requires equal courage. The play also dramatizes the socialist or Marxist view of art. Cecily says the sole duty and justification for art is social criticism. In the play, Tom Stoppard has intertextual references to Leninist view of art. He directly quotes some speeches by Lenin. He writes, we want to establish and we shall establish a free press, free not simply from the police but also from the capital, from careerism, and what is more, free from bourgeois anarchist individualism. These last words may sound paradoxical or an affront to the reader. Calm yourself, gentlemen. First of all, we are discussing party literature and its subordination to party control. Everyone is free to write and say whatever he likes without any restrictions, but every voluntary association is also free to expel members who use the name of the party to advocate anti-party views. Like Jara wanted to free art, Lenin also wants to free art from several constricting forces. He wants to free art from police, from other social institutional structures, including capitalism and anarchic bourgeois individualism. However, the question that arises before us is whether can art ever be free? Can art ever be neutral? And if it can be free, what are the forces which constrain artistic creativity? For long, literature was regulated by religious forces. Then there were temporal forces like the power of king which tried to control and regulate art and literature. With the rise of capitalism, industrialization and modernity, art was subjected to the controls of capitalist forces. By the time we move to 20th century, art gets controlled by what Lenin calls anarchic bourgeois individualism. Don't you think so? All these forces are equally repressive for art. They don't allow an artist freedom to express himself or herself creatively. Lenin wants art to free from all these constraints. Yet, Lenin is a communist. He wants literature to be party literature. He wants to transform literature into propaganda, of which Joyce is certainly critical. Because for Joyce, literature is not for perpetuation of some propaganda, it is for art's sake. Thus we see Travestis presents four distinct views on art. Lenin professes a belief in art as an instrument of the Marxist revolution. Jara represents Dadaist anti-art. Joyce is the spokesman of art for art's sake, and Carr holds a relatively innocuous bourgeois view of art. Now that we have read two major plays by Tom Stoppard, let us end our class by discussing Tom Stoppard as a playwright. Let us begin by understanding what kind of playwright Tom Stoppard was and what were his philosophical concerns. Tom Stoppard shared anti-art tendencies of Dadaist movement, as you might have noticed while we discussed his play Travestis. Tom Stoppard himself says, exactly so, if I had to make an ultimate statement about where I think true value lies, I don't think I would give much house room to anti-art and anarchic art. But I found what Jara had to say quite interesting in some curious ways. Stoppard's plays are artistic creations of anti-art. They both continue and critique different dramatic traditions available to Tom Stoppard as a playwright. Most of his plays are absurdist explorations on the nature of freedom and unfreedom in human life. In his play Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, Tom Stoppard has written, I am very fond of boats myself. I like the way they are recontained. You don't have to worry about which way to go or whether to go at all. The question does not arise because you are on a boat, aren't you? He says, we have traveled too far and our momentum has taken over. We move ideally towards eternity without possibility of reprieve or hope of explanation. He says, where we went wrong was getting on a boat. We can move, of course, change direction, rattle about, but our movement is contained within a larger one that carries us along as inexorably as the wind and current. Stoppard's metaphor clearly spells out his philosophy of freedom and unfreedom. While we are drifting on a boat in the sea, we are free. We can go anywhere, wherever we want. But can we truly go somewhere? Of course, we cannot, because we are drifting. Our movements are contained within a larger force. Tom Stoppard is trying to suggest that human lives are similarly free and bound. Free because human beings have freedom to do what they will. But human lives are also bound and unfree because human beings have no freedom to will and desire. There are forces like chance, fate, transcendental will, divine will, whatever name you want to give, you can give, and they control our lives. Human beings are both chained and unchained. Death is another important theme that we find out in the plays of Tom Stoppard. We have already discussed what is death while reading the play Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. In the play, death appears to be either absence or extinction. Ross says, "Is he dead?" Player says, "Who knows?" Gill says, "He is not coming back." Player says, "Hardly." Ross says, "He is dead then. He is dead as far as we are concerned." Player says, "Oh, or we are as far as he is." Certainly, Tom Stoppard seems to suggest that death is the absence of man from this earth, which we have already discussed in detail in our last class. We also discussed in our last class that plays of Tom Stoppard are about memory and epistemic emptiness. In the play Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, player says, "By this time tomorrow, we might have forgotten everything we ever knew." That's a thought, isn't it? We would be back where we started improvising. Like actors have to forget everything they have remembered on the next day of the performance, human beings also forget what happens yesterday in their lives. If they would remember all that has happened yesterday and the day before and so on, they would be burdened with sorrow, pain and anxiety. Therefore, human beings must experience amnesia, although this amnesia would lead to epistemological emptiness. Plays of Tom Stoppard are remembered for their wordplay. Let us discuss one example from the play Travesties to find out how creatively and artistically Tom Stoppard uses words. Carr says, "Is there anything of interest?" Bennett says, "There is a revolution in Russia, sir." Carr says, "Really? What sort of revolution?" Bennett says, "A social revolution." Carr says, "A social revolution? Unaccompanied women smoking at opera, that sort of thing?" Bennett says, "Not precisely that, sir. It is more in the nature of a revolution of classes, contraposed by the physiporous disequilibrium of Russian society." Carr says, "What do you mean by classes?" Bennett says, "Masters and servants as it were, sir." Carr says, "Oh, masters and servants classes." Bennett says, "There have been scenes of violence." Carr says, "I see. Well, I am not in the least bit surprised." Bennett says, "I don't wish to appear wise after the event, but anyone with half an acquaintance with Russian society could see that the day was not far off before the exploited class, disillusioned by the neglect of its interest, alarmed by the falling value of the ruble, above all, goaded beyond endurance by the insolent rapacity of its servants, should turn upon those butlers, footmen, cooks, valets." Now you see, the entire conversation is an explanation of the word revolution. What is revolution? Whether revolution is unaccompanied women smoking at the opera, whether revolution is social revolution, whether revolution is a revolution of one class against the other, and what does the word class refer to? Master and servants. And whether revolution is associated with violence, and what is the ultimate outcome of this violent revolution? You see, Tom Stoppard builds upon words. He suggests that one word has a lot of possibilities. One word can be expressed differently. There can be multiple interpretations and explanations of the same word. This is what we can call word play in Tom Stoppard's plays. In his plays, words have lost meaning. They have no connection with truth. As the conversation in the play Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead shows. Gill says, we only know what we are told, and that is little enough. And for all we know, it isn't even true. Player says, for all anyone knows, nothing is. Everything has to be taken on trust. Truth is only that which is taken to be true. It is the currency of living. There may be nothing behind it, but it does not make any difference so long as it is honored. One acts on assumptions. Tom Stoppard is clearly indicating that human lives are centered around assumptions. When we hear words, we make certain assumptions about their meanings. So, there is a rupture between word and meaning. There is a rupture between word and its truth content. And this rupture indicates the absurdity of words and also of life. So, Tom Stoppard's plays are powerful explorations of the absurdity of human life and human existence. They are both artistic and anti-art. They blend tragic and comic in the same texts like several other absurdist playwrights. There is a linguistic game that most of his characters indulge in. All these qualities make Tom Stoppard one of the most revered playwrights of the 20th century. That's all for today. We'll meet in our next class. Thank you very much.